Well, hi everyone. My apologies for the tremendous delay. There are apparently some changes that Facebook's going through, and I had hoped to start at 6. I'm just checking to make sure. Yep, I'm on. Okay. I had intended to start right at 6 o'clock, and I came on early, but apparently they're doing some changes. So I got stuck between some of those. So I are worked out between now and the next time we're to get together. So I will go back and forth with my readers this time of day. It's kind of hard for me to see the screen. So I also don't like the glare from the light. So glad you're here. Thank y'all. Say hey Amanda. Hey Carrie. Glad that you're with me. So I'm gonna vamp for just a few minutes to give people time who have been looking for me but didn't know where I was since 6 o'clock. So again, 17 minutes. Speaking of resilience during challenging times, I was breathing and trying to practice all the stuff that I'm supposedly going to talk to you guys about while I was doing this. So give a couple of minutes for folks to come join in. But this episode is episode 6. This is a series of my work on resilience in practical terms, what it means to actually be resilient, how we can practice it ourselves, and then teach it to other people. I started to call this resilience for the average bear or resilience for family caregivers, but really it's both. So it's just practical terms, how we really understand resilience and put it into practice in our daily lives in a way that can help us not just survive, but thrive through challenging circumstances. So this is episode 6. And again, it's resilience in practical terms. Today's episode is talking about just the basics of resilience. So there are several components of resilience that I teach. You'll hear the 7 C's of resilience or the 13 components of resilience. We don't have one model of resilience just yet. We're working on it, but we're not quite there. But when I teach resilience, these are the topics that I tend to cover. There's 6, because to me, they're the topics that seem to come up most consistently in the literature as the most strong predictors of what resilience really looks like. And I'm going to cover those briefly today, just by way of introduction, so that as I continue talking about other topics, but then I'll filter back and forth in, excuse me, in talking about resilience and the components of resilience in a deeper dive. I'm just taking a lot of my information and breaking it down into smaller bite-sized pieces. So as I do that in the coming weeks, there'll be this basis of knowledge just to start with. So resilience is that thing that we have when we go through a challenging circumstances, and as a challenging circumstance or adversity, and it's the thing or the things, the components that allow us to not just survive through that time, coming out the other side of it beaten up and bedraggled. Resilience is what allows us to come through the other side, come through that adversity better than we were before. It's not just about bouncing back to where we were before the adversity started. It's about coming out the other side and being even better on the other side because of what we've gone through. It's also what we talk a lot about with folks who have experienced trauma or going through grief and loss of post-traumatic growth. That's what we're talking about here. So when we've talked about coming out the other side of this, we don't know when that's going to be, likely years at this point. And so as we are trying to find a new normal and understanding how to be in this world during this time of the pandemic, many have talked about, let's don't go back to the way things used to be. Let's find a new way to be. Let's learn the lessons about the things that worked for us and enhance upon those. And then let's be clear about the things that didn't work for us, that we've learned that, yeah, this is better for us now, the way we're doing things now. And so how are we going to be better on the other side of this? They wanted to know back in the 1920s and the 1930s what it was that allowed some children to go through a challenging circumstance, and it would seem to just hank them, wipe them out for the rest of their lives. And then there were other kids that would go through the same circumstance, but for them, instead of tanking them, it would actually elevate them and seem to compel them to becoming just these amazing people who did incredible things. And so researchers wanted to know, what's the magic bullet in here? What's the secret sauce that can help this to happen? And at first they thought it was a trait that you were either born with or you weren't. And so they called it hardiness. You're either hardy or you are not. But then they started realizing that that implied that it was something that was static, stable, that people were born with or they weren't. And that if you didn't have it, sorry, you're in trouble, you're screwed. This is just the way things are. And they started realizing in the research that wasn't the case. That resilience was something that you could build, that it was something that you could teach, and that you could grow and develop. As they continued doing research throughout the 40s and 50s, they began to really find that it was a lot about connection. Children who had at least one consistent, loving, even semi-healthy adult. But if that adult was attuned and connected to them and was consistent in their love, then that could often be enough to make or break a child's resilience. But there are other factors that build into that. So let's talk about, these are the 6 components I talk about. It is about the stories we tell ourselves, which includes meaning making, and they're called attributional styles in psychology. To what do we attribute what happened? The narrative we have, Dan Siegel and others in interpersonal neurobiology and the neuroscience of relationships and mindfulness and emotional intelligence, they talk about the fact that, completely lost my train of thought. Dan Siegel was reading recently, he was talking in the neurobiology of we, he says, that the research continues to show that the narrative style that a parent used to make sense of what happened to them in their lives can actually feed into the children, and the children often will adopt that same narrative style. And that narrative style is a strong predictor of how resilient we are or aren't. If we have a story that we tell ourselves, if our perceptions, our attributional style are about this is a threat, then we'll experience it as a threat and it will greatly impact us and we'll be traumatized by it. If we see it as an opportunity to grow, then that opportunity will mean that we will see where we can take action on our own behalf. We'll see it as a challenge that we can do something with, to work through and find the opportunities in it to find something new. But if we see it as a threat, then that's what can take us out. Do we see something as being about us? People are out to get us. The gods hate us. This is never going to be the same again. This is just woe is me. It's just, if we go there, that attributional style, that's learned helplessness. Learned optimism is, you know what, this is going to pass. It's not going to be here forever. This isn't about me. This is just life being lifey. The gods don't hate me. The universe isn't out to get me. This is just life. And this will pass. This will change. And this isn't just all about me. And there's more to my life than just this. Yes, there's this down here, the seemingly bad. But there's also this, the seemingly good. I may not be able to change the circumstances I'm in, but there are things I can do to take action on my own behalf. I'll talk about that, the finish the circle concept, in another episode. So it's about the stories we tell ourselves, the narrative style. Do we tell ourselves a family story that says, I know someone who, his motto was, if it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. And he wasn't just being funny, quoting hee-haw. He literally felt like that. He literally felt that was his narrative. And so that's how he saw life. There's a Mark Nepo quote recently I shared. I may have even shared it in the last episode, that it's less about, if what you're seeing looks off, fix what you're seeing through, fix your perceptions. But it's our perceptions that are the problem rather than what we're actually seeing. What we look for, we'll find. What we speak about things will create self-fulfilling prophecy. So the stories we tell ourselves are powerful. Do we want to tell a family story that we will never have any good luck, nothing good happens to us, this will always be bad, this will always be our legacy? Or will we tell ourselves a story that we've gone through some stuff, and wow, we've had people come around us who love us and support us. We've gotten creative and found ways to adapt and cope and to come through things. And it may have been hard, may not have been pretty, but wow, we found our way through together. That's a very different narrative. So that's the first thing. The stories we tell ourselves, our narrative, our attributional styles, whether we are more optimistic or whether we're more pessimistic and in helplessness. The second is about locus of control. So again, still playing into the learned helplessness and the learned optimism. Locus of control is about whether we internalize our locus of control and make it be about what there are the things that we can change and the things that we can improve and shift, or do we externalize our locus of control and make it everyone else's fault and everyone else's responsibility? If they would just do this, I would be fine. If only they would, then I would be okay. That is giving away our power and giving away our control, and that's externalizing it in a way that is not resilient. Resilience says, I may be powerless to change people and circumstances, but as my mentors have always reminded me, I am not helpless to take action on my own behalf. I can set boundaries. I can ask for what I need. I can monitor the stories I'm telling myself in my head. There are plenty of things that we can do, even in the light of the things that we can't change. There are a lot of things that we can. And when we put our focus there, that's when we can make a tremendous difference. We don't want to focus on something and frame it as a threat. Again, back to the stories. Bonanno calls it the PTEs, potentially traumatic events. They're traumatic based on the stories we tell ourselves about them and whether we see them as an opportunity or a challenge. Or do we see something as a threat that's going to take us out? And then do we take action on our own behalf, or do we cede our power to everyone else and to the circumstance and give up? What are the things that we can change? It is also about community and connection. Social contact theory tells us that the more close, positive relationships we have with other safe people, that every new relationship forms this lattice work, a new relationship here, and it forms this social safety net so that we trust that if something happens, we won't completely fall. It lets us know that we can be creative, which is the next component of resilience, which is about adaptivity, creativity, flexibility, coping styles, or coping or lack thereof. And all of that requires safety. To be adaptive, to be creative is to take a risk. In and of itself, creativity is a risk. And because it's doing something new, we don't know if it's going to work. It's creative, it's new, it's novel. And so creativity requires risk. It involves risk. Fails and we fall and things go badly, then that social safety net we have around us will catch us. We won't completely fall. And people won't judge us and they won't shame us. Our community will be there for us. We can be more adaptive and more flexible and creative in our coping if we feel safe. And we feel safe if we have community and connection. And we can find community connection when we're taking action on our own behalf and internalizing our locus of control. And we're more willing to do that if we tell ourselves a story that we're capable of it. So the stories we tell ourselves, locus of control, community and connection, adaptability, flexibility, creativity, which involves safety. And the next component is self-care, the self-care we do or don't do. It is not just some fuzzy woo good idea concept. It is our greatest, I tell professionals all the time, it's our greatest clinical competence. I can have all the best tools in my tool belt as a healthcare provider or as a clinician, all the best mnemonics, all the best protocol, the best technical skills. But at the end of the day, if I'm not grounded and centered well enough to wield those tools well, I'll be ineffective at least and dangerous at worst. And none of us got in this gig to be dangerous. So we have to be practicing. It's our greatest clinical competence to do our own self-care first. And that's if you are a family caregiver or if you're the average bear chiming in and you want to know how to be good to your neighbor, your friends, your sister-in-law, the checker at the grocery store. It starts with taking care of ourselves first. The neuroscience proves that. I'll talk more about interpersonal neurobiology and the neuroscience of connection later, but about integration, the importance of integration in emotional intelligence. And to be integrated is to really be connected with the both and story rather than the extremes of the either or. Again, we'll talk more about that later. But self-care is about taking good care of me first, being aware enough of me first, keeping my own sense of calm available so my prefrontal cortex isn't hijacked such that I don't know that I have choices. When I stay more mindful, more mindfully connected, when I hold good boundaries and protect my space and protect my energy and my emotional well-being, and I do good self-care, I am more likely to stay calm in the midst of crisis and to know that I have choices, to have enough of a pause, to not get hijacked by all the stuff coming up around me, but to be able to go, all right, this sucks. This isn't fun. This is scary. And I have choices here. When we know we have choice, we have freedom. It's that freedom of the difference between reacting with a knee-jerk reaction from our lizard brain out of a threat response, which is thoughtful, mindful, considered, involves the executive function and reasoning of the prefrontal cortex. And it's not letting our amygdala just so freak out that we don't pause long enough to realize we have choice. So the more we do that, speaking of good self-care, my rescue dog, Teddy, is helping herself to a long drink right now. The treat that I gave her to have her be quiet until I fed her supper after I finished this apparently made her thirsty. So self-care means that we're better able to show up for others. We can't give any more care for others than we're giving to ourselves for any length of time. We'll get toxic. We'll have sucky boundaries. We will burn ourselves out. We'll have compassion fatigue. People won't like us. It's not healthy for any length of time. It's one of the next short ebooks I want to write as a series on emotional intelligence for caregivers, both family caregivers and professional caregivers. But we have to take care of ourselves first. It's a cliche, but it's because it's so there's so much truth to it that we have to put our own oxygen mask on first before we take care of others. Because if we don't, we won't be any good for anybody for any length of time. So the last component that I talk about with resilience is about this issue of gratitude and hope. It's similar to the explanatory styles and the perception and the stories we tell ourselves and the narrative, the first component, but it's different. Gratitude and hope. We think of gratitude and hope as feelings, and they're not. I can feel grateful. I can feel hopeful. But I come to those two things by practicing gratitude, practicing hope. I'll share more about some ways to actually do that later. And I talked about hope in, was it the last episode, episode 5, on how hope is built. So take a look at that if you want to hear a little bit more about how I see hope and how we can practice hope and build it for ourselves rather than feel like we need to give it to each other. We can help each other find hope in humanity, but we can't give someone hope in themselves. That's an inside job. But we can help someone build hope by the way that we show up for them and say, I trust you to find your way. And while you do, you're not alone. We've got you. That safety net. It all flows together. So the stories we tell ourselves, the perceptions and stories we tell ourselves. The second is the locus of control, whether we internalize or externalize. The third is community and connection and building that connection with not just with others, but also the connection with ourselves and the connection with nature and something greater than ourselves, whatever that is for you. And then the fourth component is that adaptivity and flexibility and creativity, which involves safety. And then the fifth component that I speak about with resilience is actually the self-care and boundaries that we must practice. It's the most loving and caring thing that we can do, because if we're not monitoring our own energy and taking care of ourselves and filling ourselves up, we won't have anything for others. My friend Rose is fond of saying, yeah, I don't have the level of sanity and serenity necessary for this situation. So we set boundaries to protect our energy, boundary with media, with other people, with things that are or aren't helpful, things that are or aren't toxic. We manage our own energy and take care of that first. And then this last one of gratitude and hope, we train our brains to see the positive. Our brains are drawn towards the negative. We need to know where the fence is knocked down so that the saber-toothed tiger may come in and eat us. Our brains, it's hardwired in us to focus on the negative, to look for the negative, to look for what's incomplete. In healthcare, we're constantly looking for diagnose. What's broken? What do we need to fix? So it's adaptive that our brains are hardwired to look for the negative and what's wrong. So because it does that so easily, it doesn't as naturally focus on the good. We have to intentionally look for the good. We have to train our brains to find gratitude. So again, I'll talk about that more in a future segment. But for now, those are some of the components of resilience that I talk about. I'll be talking about them more in depth in the coming weeks. I did put together a playlist on YouTube, working with my web person, shout out Sherry, about how we get these loaded up to my website. I will go ahead and give you a sneak peek. The professional development series on the 15-minute fill-ups, resilience in practical terms for professionals, that I did as formal webinars. I've had that series as an introductory video, and then parts 1 through 4. Parts 1 through 3 are uploaded on the website now at carlacheatham.com. The 4th video I need to finish recording. I'll probably do that tomorrow or the next day and get that uploaded to the website over the weekend. But I'll probably get this series of videos once after I've finished recording these on Facebook Live. I'm taking them and I'm putting them on YouTube. So there's a playlist on the Carla Cheatham channel where you can find the resilience in practical terms. The pilot that y'all have laughed at me about, the 5-minute fill up that turned into 32 minutes. So now we're going about 15 to 20 minutes. A little over today, but I vamped at the beginning because I was apologizing for being late and making sure folks found me and got a chance to chime in. But hopefully this series is helpful. Share it wherever you'd like. Look at the entire playlist for the first 5 episodes. This will be in episode 6. I'll figure out what the heck is going on with Facebook. Text me or send me a message in the comments of the recording to let me know what other topics you want to hear about. Because even as I talk about emotional intelligence, mindfulness, resilience, self-care, all of these things, they all flow together. I'll be covering a ton of topics in the coming weeks, but let me know if there's something in particular that would be most helpful for you. All right. Hopefully something I've said today has been helpful in giving you some renewed sense of, yeah, we can do this. We can find our way, and we're going to be better on the other side. If we'll allow it, this time can transform us so that we will come out the other side better as humanity than we've ever been before. Maybe not, but maybe. And if it's going to happen, we're the ones that are going to make it happen. So join me. Let's do it. Why the hell not? Have a good night, folks. Rest well. Go find my friend Katie Marie, who's doing Nightly Noodles. Fabulous music that you can listen to while you get ready for bed and wind down. No talking, just music, and it's gorgeous. I had it on all last night. So much love, everyone. Take care. Mwah. I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.